Alright, so today we're going to be talking about, mostly we're going to be talking about conditional statements. And before that, we need to define a couple of terms, and then we'll get to the conditional statements. So the first thing we want to define is inductive reasoning, and that's on page 91 and it's highlighted. It is inductive reasoning. It's just a fancy word for using specific examples to arrive at a conclusion. Inductive reasoning. Using specific examples to arrive at a conclusion. And you use inductive reasoning all the time, every day, multiple times throughout the day. It's just geometry decided to give it this name. A conclusion statement made using inductive reasoning is called a conjecture. Conjecture. So in its most basic form, okay, if you were looking at this pattern of triangle and then circle, square, triangle, circle, blank. Alright? And a question would be, use inductive reasoning to make a conjecture about the next shape. Okay? So using inductive reasoning is when you're looking at this example, these specific examples of triangle, circle, square, triangle, circle, square. Okay? Use inductive reasoning to make a conjecture about the next shape. Well, your conjecture would be the next shape is a square. That is what inductive reasoning is, and that is what a conjecture is. The inductive reasoning is when you're looking at specific examples to come up with a conclusion, all right, and then making a statement about the conclusion. That's called a conjecture. Is everybody okay with that? Very good. Look at the top of page 94. And let's get this down. To show that a conjecture is true, you must prove it for all cases. To show that a conjecture is true, you must prove it for all cases. It only takes one counterexample to show a conjecture is false. Let's write this. Counterexample can be a number, a drawing, or statement showing an example to be false. Everybody all right so far? Okay. So then what I want you to do is we're going to skip over to page 107. And we're going to talk about a conditional statement. A conditional statement is a statement written in if-then form. An example. If you would like to speak to a representative, then you will press 0 now. A conditional statement is a statement written in if-then form. An example of a conditional statement is, if you would like to speak to a representative, then press 0 now. The symbol for a conditional statement. Word, symbol, model. Let's do this little table here. Let's do a table like they got on page 107, the conditional statement. Let's do words, symbols, model. All right, words. This is going to be if-then. The symbol for an if-then statement is P, arrow, Q. The model. It's a Venn diagram. With the Q in the big circle, the P is inside of that. That's P, arrow, Q. You read this symbol. If P, then Q. That's what the arrow means. If P, then Q. Alright? Now, I'm sure this all seems like Chinese right now, but it's all going to come together and make sense very shortly. The hypothesis. The hypothesis of a conditional statement. Hypothesis follows the if. All right? The symbol for the hypothesis is the lowercase cursive p. The conclusion of this conditional statement. It follows the word then. And it's represented by, or its symbol is lowercase q, cursive. So kind of going back, everything we've talked about inductive reasoning, which is when you look at some specific examples to come up with a conclusion. Making a conjecture is when you analyze those examples and you make a statement. Okay? Your statement can be in the form of a conditional statement. A conditional statement is a if-then statement. If it is 9:23 on Wednesday, then the bell is going to ring. That's a conditional statement. Okay? It's got an if and it's got a then. In a conditional statement, there's a symbol for the if-then statement. The letter P with an arrow and the letter Q. You read that symbol, if P, then Q. In a conditional statement, there's a hypothesis. The hypothesis is whatever follows the word if. Its symbol is just the P. There's a conclusion in a conditional statement. That conclusion is what follows the word then, and it's represented by the lowercase cursive q. So if you look at the bottom of page 107 now, here's what you're going to be working on, some of the stuff you're going to be working on today. You've got a statement down there. It says, if the forecast is rain, then I will take an umbrella. You're asked to identify the hypothesis and conclusion of each conditional statement. So the hypothesis, we're going to say the P. The P is what follows the if. If the forecast is rain, so right here is your hypothesis. The forecast is rain. That is the hypothesis of the statement. Identify the hypothesis and the conclusion. The conclusion, its symbol is the lowercase cursive q. The conclusion is what follows the word then in the statement. I will take an umbrella is the conclusion, okay? So the sentence was a conditional statement. You were asked to identify the hypothesis and the conclusion in the statement. And that is how you do it. What follows the if is the hypothesis. What follows the then is the conclusion. Any questions up till now? Okay, let's do one more of these on an example where it gets a little bit fuzzy maybe. Let's look at example 1b. A number is divisible by 10. If its last digit is a 0. And again, you're asked to identify the hypothesis and the conclusion. Now, this is a little bit trickier because there is not the word then in the statement. But there is an if. And you know that the hypothesis follows the if. Agreed? So in this statement, its last digit is a 0, is what follows the if. Okay? So that becomes your hypothesis. So your hypothesis here is its last digit is a 0. And if you wanted to clean that up, you could say that if a number's last digit is a 0. Okay? The conclusion of this statement, since there's not a word then in the original statement, what followed the if was the hypothesis. The rest of the statement is the conclusion. All right? So the conclusion here is the number is divisible by 10. Or number is divisible by 10. Okay, and as you start working through some of these problems, it'll make a little bit more sense to you. What you're going to be doing today is just identifying the hypothesis and the conclusion of some conditional statements. And then tomorrow we're going to talk about related conditional statements and how to write those. So I want you to do a little bit of practice today. And your practice is going to start back here on page 94. So on page 94. Do 1 through 6. And that's just getting familiar with the term write a conjecture. Remember, that's just looking at specific examples and then making a statement. And after you do that, on page 111, just do problems 1 through 4. And that's going to be identifying the hypothesis and conclusion of each statement. All right, check your odds in the back of the book, please. Now, moving forward from now for the rest of the year, your assignment each day is also to check focus. All right, check focus for homework questions. Clear? Check focus for homework questions.